Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to my YouTube storytelling channel. I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me. Today, I am going to be reading a story called Saccharine, and this is a story that I wrote, and it is dedicated to Ka Bao Moua. This story is intended for mature audiences due to language, adult content, and situations.
I did a lot of bad things, and never did I give in, just 'cause the thought.
You remembered well about the lawsuit, Lincoln said as we rode the elevator up to our office. The lunch was cut short when James walked out on us, heated and embarrassed. Lincoln and I finished lunch and then took the company car back. I noticed that he was staring straight ahead, avoiding my eyes. He had this dark presence that made my body respond in a way I had never known it could. I felt my heart beat faster, my pulse intensified, and my hands began to sweat. Did he notice? Of course not. He was in control of everything. I hope I didn't make any mistakes, I said. You did well. The elevator doors opened and we walked out together. The young lady at the desk smiled at us and handed him some messages. And then she went to clacking at her computer. When we entered our office, Maverick was standing by the window dressed in a blue suit waiting for us. His eyes spoke volumes that he knew how the lunch had gone. I swallowed hard as I grabbed my notepad and decided to give the two of them some privacy when Lincoln spoke my name. Sit down, he said. I did as he asked, and the two brothers took a seat across from me. I noticed that Maverick had a smirk on his face. Lincoln, however, was not grinning at all. So, James walked out on you, Maverick began. It doesn't surprise me. He's a snake that should be cut off, Lincoln replied. I swallowed, trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing, and then Lincoln turned his gaze on me and our eyes met. I almost stopped breathing. The look he sent me was full of a wild passion I'd never seen before. He didn't talk, didn't move. He only stared. I fidgeted uncomfortably until Maverick cleared his throat and it broke our gaze. Look, as much as I hated James Waldie, he was making us money. Have you figured out what you're going to do? Maverick asked. Returning his gaze to his brother, Lincoln replied, Yes, I'm going to buy out his business and shred it apart. Maverick raised his eyebrows. Oh, is that so? Why the hell not? He fucked around with too many people and cost them money and their lives. I'm going to give him a taste of his own medicine. It'll be for the benefit of him. He'll learn that I'm serious when it comes to business, and I'll make sure he can't start business anywhere else. Maverick stood up. I'll leave you at that then. Ka Bao, walk with me. I got up and walked with him out the door. When we reached the door, he took a right turn down a hallway toward his office. Can he do what he just said? I asked. Maverick laughed. My brother never jokes when it comes to business. He'll do exactly as he said he would. And James Waldie won't know what hit him. I heard it was you who mentioned the lawsuit. You've got good eyes. Anyone else would have missed it, especially who the client suing him was. I blushed. I pay attention to details. That's what we need, and that's what got you the job. Lincoln sometimes lacks sense of humor when it comes to life itself and makes everyone around him a bit dark. Don't be afraid to let your voice be heard when a moment should arise. You're a great asset to this company, and I'd hate to lose you over something stupid my brother might do. Not that he would jeopardize anything, but it's a fine printing I thought I should say out loud. I didn't really understand, but I just nodded. Thank you. Good day, Ka Bao. That was the cue to my closing. I nodded and headed back the same way to Lincoln's office. I found him just hanging up the phone. I put the notepad on the desk and sat down just as my phone began to ring. I picked it up. Ka Bao Nelson. Were you ever going to tell me you got a new job? My mother's voice came on the line. I blushed and shot my eyes toward Lincoln, who was staring at me. I can't talk right now. I'll call you later. I hung up. If he calls again, let me know and I'll step out, Lincoln said boldly. He? Your husband? Boyfriend? I let out a nervous chuckle. Oh, no, it wasn't my husband or boyfriend. It was someone else. Oh, well, I had assumed the latter. I remained mute as I lowered my head. Sorry. Don't apologize. Let's go over the details of James Waldy's business and see if we can get this show on the road. When I returned home, I was exhausted. I wasn't used to the late hours, and one look at the clock told me I needed to hit the sheets. I undressed, showered, and had just put on a new pot of coffee when my phone rang. I walked over, and Colleen's name was lit up on the screen. I answered. Ka Bao, Ellen has come back with another offer. Can you meet us in the morning? She asked. I sighed. I'm not sure. I just got promoted, and my schedule is pretty busy right now. Can a late evening do? Oh, congratulations. Yes, I can set up for a later time. How about 7? Perfect. I hung up and rubbed my head. What was Alan going to offer me now? The last time it had been an embarrassing number that made me see red. I had supported him for so long, and all he could do was give me 15% of his assets. I deserved better, especially since he was the one who was screwing around. I plopped on the couch and shut my eyes, exhausted and remembering a pair of dark eyes that burned into me. I jerked awake and realized I had fallen asleep on the couch. The lights were still on. I got up, groggy, and made my way to the kitchen. I shut off the coffee maker and turned the lights off. As I walked to the bedroom, I shed off the robe I was wearing and crawled under the sheets. I didn't need to look at the clock to realize it was late. But as soon as I hit the bed, my eyes shut and I slept. Knowing I would be meeting Alan later, I decided to wear my best dress. It was a gray one that came to my knees, and I paired it with my red pumps. I let my hair down and applied some makeup. When I entered the office at 7, Lincoln was nowhere to be found. A little after 8, the young lady at the desk arrived. I walked out to where she was getting settled. She saw me and smiled. Lincoln called earlier today. He won't be in. He'd like you to prepare some presentations on a few accounts. The paperwork is on your desk, she said. Thank you. I returned to the office and found a folder with my name written in his handwriting. I opened the folder and dove into work. By lunchtime, I was starved. I called up Amy to meet me for lunch. We met at a small cafe around the corner, not far from where we both worked. She was wearing a black pinstripe suit, and when she walked in, men turned their head towards her. Yeah, it was never a surprising moment when that happened. She saw me and waved to me as she walked toward me. You bitch, she cried. You look amazing. Promotion pays, doesn't it? I smiled as she sat down. It sure does. Although I'm meeting Alan again tonight. She cringed and rolled her eyes. That prick needs to get his dick chopped off for what he did to you. How about we refrain from using that language since we're about to eat here? She laughed. Girl, you need a drink. No, I need to eat. I'm hungry.
I did a lot of bad things, and never did I give in, just 'cause the thought of...
After lunch with Amy, I returned to my office to finish working on the presentation Lincoln had set out for me to do. At 6:30, I left for my appointment with Alan and my lawyer. As I made my way to the building, my heart felt heavy. I didn't know what he would throw at me this time. I sighed deeply as I entered the door and found all of them already waiting for me. Sorry, I'm late, I said as I walked in. No, you're right on time, Colleen said. I turned to find Alan staring at me with cold eyes. His look was full of hatred as I sat down. Before I could say a word, his lawyer handed Colleen a folder. She took it and opened it. Then she handed it to me. I glanced at it and saw that he was now going to be giving me half of his assets, equaling at almost $250,000. I looked up at him as he continued his dark stare. Did you want a moment to think through? Colleen asked. I shook my head. No, I'll take it. Alan pushed back from his chair and got up. Good, because this is the last time I'll be seeing your face. He walked out as I signed the paper and handed it back to Colleen. I thanked her for the time and walked out. I let out a breath of relief, knowing that if this was finalized, our divorce would be settled, and I could go back to my maiden name. I took the elevator down, and when I opened the door to go out, my arm was yanked back violently by Alan. He was waiting for me outside. I tried to jerk my arm free, but he tightened his hold as he pulled me toward him. "You heartless fucking bitch. You're taking my money and you act all high and mighty. I promise you this isn't the end," he said. "Let me go, Ellen. You're hurting me," I cried. His fingers dug deeper and I felt the pain in my arm. "If you think this is pain, wait until I get you for good." I tried once again to free my arm and failed. That was when I heard a voice behind me, a voice I had come to think of as smooth, dark, and wild. "Let her go, or I'll make sure you can't work another day in your life," Lincoln said. Ellen's eyes looked up as Lincoln walked toward us. His gaze dropped to mine, and then he shot up his head at Lincoln again. He finally released my hand, and I stumbled backward into Lincoln's arms. He caught me and gently set me aside as he came to stand before me. Alan looked from me to him, and then he laughed. "Seriously, Ka Bao, you and I have been separated for this short amount of time, and the best you can do is him?" "He's got nothing on me," Alan said. "If I were you, I'd keep my mouth shut. You're making a big mistake in letting her go as it is, and being that you and I are both businessmen, you really should take a look at what you're going to lose," Lincoln said. Alan laughed. "Look, if you like leftovers, be my guest and take her. She's not even as good as she looks. She's worse than a pity fuck." Tears filled my eyes as Lincoln smiled and stepped forward. "Well, let's just say you and I are quite different. For instance, I'm quite well hung." Alan's face lost its color. "What the fuck? If you ever touch her again, I'll make sure you end up wiping toilet seats for the rest of your life." He turned to me and extended a hand. I took it and we walked away as Alan tried to resume his posture. When we had walked far enough, I let his hand go and took a deep breath. I stopped walking and managed to try to look at him. "Thank you for helping me. I think I'm good now. You can go to whatever it was that you were going to," I said. His gaze softened and he took a step toward me. "Are you sure you're all right?" "Yes," I whispered, and then I started crying. I felt stupid as the gates opened and I started bawling. Before I knew it, he had me in his arms and was comforting me. Oh, he smelled good, like good old-fashioned comfort as he held me. Oddly enough, I felt safe in his arms. His hold was strong as he held me. When I had cried enough, I pulled back and he handed me a tissue. I took it and dabbed at my eyes and nose. I was embarrassed as I looked away. "I'm so sorry," I said. "Don't apologize. It is not your fault. He was being a dick." "I'm embarrassed." "For what? For feeling hurt? For feeling violated?" "No, Ka Bao, don't ever feel embarrassed for truly being honest about your feelings. I don't like women who hide it by acting brave." I looked up and sniffed. "Well, I think I'm okay now. I'll just go back to my car." "Are you parked in the company lot?" "Yes, it wasn't that far, and so I thought I'd walk over." He gently took my elbow. "My car is right there. Let me drive you over." "No," I insist. When we arrived at my car, I was feeling a lot better. Lincoln had been quiet on the drive over and gave me some room to think and breathe. I had been thankful he was there because I had no idea what Alan might have done. I got out of his BMW and walked over to my Ford. I looked up at him as he walked over to me. "Do you need some time off?" he asked. Shaking my head, I replied, "No, I'll be fine. Thank you for everything. I'll see you tomorrow." Nodding, he said, "See you tomorrow." I got into my car and drove home, my eyes wandering to watch my rearview mirror at Lincoln still standing watching me drive off. When I reached the intersection of Highway 94, I took a deep breath and let the traffic swallow me up. I was feeling better, but I still felt the fear that instilled me when Alan wouldn't let my arm go. He'd never been abusive, but there was a first for everything. The look in his eyes was frightening, and it made my heart stop beating. I wondered what he would have done if Lincoln hadn't stepped in. Screaming awake seldom happened to me, yet that was how I found myself at 4 in the morning. My body was drenched in sweat, my throat sore from crying, and my hands shaking. I didn't think what Alan had threatened me with would follow me to my dreams, but it did. And in my dreams, he had beaten me to a pulp. I shut my eyes, trying to get the images of myself lying in a pool of blood out, but all I could do was remember how vividly the pain felt. Sobbing, I pulled my legs up to my knees and hugged myself. I thought I would be all right, but as I rocked myself back and forth, I realized I wasn't going to be okay. Not for a long time. By the time 6 rolled around, my eyes were swollen and my throat was hoarse. I couldn't go to work like this. I called up Lincoln's number and left him a message that I was going to be at home and that I was sorry for not coming in. But knowing he had seen what had happened last night, I knew he would understand. I took some sleeping pills and hoped they would erase some pain and let me catch some much-needed energy. When I woke, it was noon, and I was starched in my throat and my belly was growling. I rolled out of bed and showered, letting the hot water wake me slowly. I dressed in jeans and a simple t-shirt, letting my hair down to dry. I walked to the kitchen and pulled out a box of cereal to eat. I reached for my phone and saw I had a few missed calls. 4 of them were from Lincoln, and 2 were from my mother. 4 from Lincoln? I sighed and dialed Lincoln's number. He answered on the first ring. "Ka Bao, are you all right?" he asked gruffly. "Yes, I am now. I'm sorry, I took some sleeping pills and knocked out." "Thank God. I was so worried. When you didn't return my calls, I had the worst scenario in mind. I was about to come to your place to make sure you were okay." I sat down, unsure of why he was so determined about my safety. "I'm fine now. Thank you, and I'm sorry about missing work today." "No, don't worry about it. Take all the time you need. In fact, take tomorrow off too. I'll see you come Monday morning." I was speechless. "Okay, thank you." He bid me goodbye and hung up. I was a bit confused at his attitude, but I brushed it off. I dialed my mother's number and she answered on the 4th ring. "Why haven't you gotten back to me?" she cried. "I've been busy. I'm sorry." She sighed deeply. "Ka Bao, I spoke to Alan yesterday. He said you're already dating a new man." I was shocked, and then anger filled me. "Mother, why are you talking to him?" "Of course I talk to him. He's my son-in-law." "Your son-in-law, who is about to have another child with a different woman other than your daughter? How can you go behind my back like this?" "Don't get upset, Ka Bao. I love him still. He's a good man. He's just not the perfect man. You got to learn to forgive him at some point." "That's my business. If I should ever forgive him or not, it's my business. What right do you have talking to Alan behind my back? He's the one at fault here." "Ka Bao, calm down. I don't think you realize how much it hurt Alan when he realized you were already dating someone else." "I'm not dating anyone else. He was my boss, and he happened to be there when Alan assaulted me outside of my lawyer's building." My mother was deaf to what I had to say. "You should really consider if this is the right route for you." Mother, I'm hanging up." I ended the call and threw my phone down on the couch. I had enough stress as it was, and I didn't need to deal with my mother. The phone rang again, and this time it was my dad calling. I picked it up knowing it was my mother asking him to call. "Hi, Dad," I said. "Ka Bao, are you all right? What's going on?" he asked gently. Just hearing his voice made me feel emotional. I couldn't hide the tears, and my voice cracked. "I'm just exhausted of all this. Can I come over? Please."
I did a lot of bad things, and never did I give in. Just 'cause the thought of being vulnerable made me feel less than I.
A little after 1, my father, Darren, arrived bearing Chinese food and wine. He was always a good man with a kind heart. He was a tall, slender man with thinning blonde hair and bright blue eyes. He was a contractor, and even though he was now retired, he still wore the contractor fashion statements, overalls and boots. The moment he set down the food and opened his arms, I burst into tears and ran into him. He held me, and I inhaled his scent of spicy wood, male, and soap. I would never get enough of it. It always made me feel like I was home. "Tell me, sweetheart," he said gently. I pulled away and wiped my nose. I took him to sit on the couch and curled my legs underneath me. Why is Mom taking Ellen's side? She's deaf to me. My father took a deep breath and rubbed his face. Your mother isn't deaf to you. She's just got a problem hanging on to things better let go. I stared at him and saw exhaustion in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Why do you love her so much? Smiling, he shrugged his shoulders. Why does anyone love anyone? It's a feeling that creates a center for us. Your mother is my balance. She's not perfect. No one is. But she's the gal I asked to take my name. Through good or bad, I will love her no matter what. I felt the thickness of hurt fill my heart. Why couldn't I get a guy like you? You do have me, darling. I smiled and took a deep breath. Alan is nothing compared to you. He has hurt me in so many ways. And that's why I could never forgive him. He has taken the brightness from your eyes. I always cherished it when I saw you. When he led you down that path, it disappeared. Ka Bao, I want you to promise me that you will never let a man like Alan rule over you. You're too good for that. I want to see that brightness again. I felt the tears well up in my eyes. I don't know how to find it, Daddy. He came to me and wrapped his arms around me. You can find it. You found the courage to leave him. That's enough as it is. But now that you're free from him, don't let his shadow rule over your life. Stop thinking of others. Start loving yourself. I nodded. I'll try. He kissed the top of my head. Come on, let's dig into some greasy food. When my father left a little after 3, I felt better. The wine and food helped me calm down, and the laughter he brought to me made my heartache melt away. That was how special he was to me. He could just sit and talk to me, and everything would be right as rain. I felt so good, I decided to take a walk. Putting my shoes on, I descended the stairs and strolled along the St. Anthony Bridge. The sun was out and it was warm. Lovers holding hands, families chasing one another, and joggers were seen out beside me. I took in the fresh air and walked to the railing. I shut my eyes and let the sun warm over me. And when I opened them again, I saw Lincoln jogging. I almost fainted at the sight of him. In the office, his body was clothed in business suits, but today, this moment, he was half naked, wearing only a pair of blue shorts. His stomach was tightly designed with abs that made me want to run my fingers over them. His chest was hard, well-muscled, and glistening with sweat. His dark hair was over his eyes, and his biceps were large and well-formed. I sucked in a breath as his gaze roamed until it met mine. I stood frozen as he stopped jogging and stared at me, and then he strolled over while all the women stared after him. When he reached me, he ran a hand through his hair, and I could smell his scent, male and musky. Damn it. I felt myself uncoil before him. Ka Bao, he said. I didn't know that you jogged. My legs were now mentally kicking myself in the ass. What a conversation starter I was. He smiled. I normally run in the gym, but the weather was nice today. How are you doing? I nodded my head. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. He looked around and then his eyes fell on me again. You must live close by. I pointed to the building behind him. I live up there. How convenient for you. And what a view you must wake up to. Yes, to both. He nodded. Would it be too much trouble to ask if I could come up for a drink of water? I'm thirsty. My throat went dry, and when I spoke, my voice cracked. Sure. My apartment was usually too big for me, but for some reason, with Lincoln standing in the middle of the kitchen, half naked and drinking water, it felt so small I could barely breathe. I kept my distance away from him and watched him with dark eyes. He had no idea how incredibly gorgeous he was at this moment, He was good enough to devour and eat. When he set the glass down, his tongue flicked across his lips, and I turned away. You have a nice place, he said. Thanks, I said quickly. He walked around the room, taking a glance here and there. Then his eyes turned to me. You must be wondering what I'm doing here. I raised my brows. You're drinking? He laughed. You're so innocent, Ka Bao. If only you knew what dark thoughts roamed inside of my mind. Is that supposed to scare me? He walked toward me. I came here to lay myself out to you. What did he mean? I watched as his eyes flickered back and forth. I caught no hint of irony, and I began to sweat. He broke the gaze by roaming his eyes over me from head to toe. I felt conscious as his eyes returned to mine, and then he walked behind him, and I felt him move toward me until his hips were touching mine. I've been watching you for weeks, Ka Bao, he whispered. My eyes flew open. I wanted you the moment I heard you were divorcing that scumbag. I turned around too fast, and our mouths touched. I gasped and stepped back, but he pulled me into his arms and kissed me. When I felt him flick his tongue across my lower lip, devouring me, my knees went weak. I was gasping as his hands ran up my back to my neck and held. You make me burn, he whispered. Lincoln? I gasped. You're burning, he said. I know. You're burning. His deep voice rocked me to the present. What the fuck just happened? I jerked awake and found my sleeve had caught fire. I shook it and cleared my throat as I turned the stove off. I was heating up some pasta for Lincoln and me to eat when my mind had formed a wet dream in the middle of the day. Lincoln was standing in my kitchen with his shirt on and staring at me. The glass of water he had been drinking from was empty. He wasn't kissing me. He wasn't into me. He wasn't trying to seduce me. It was all in my head. I lost my head there for a bit, I said. Are you all right? I nodded. Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. I took some plates from the cupboard and filled them with pasta. I handed one to him and he took it. He walked to sit down at the table and he picked up his fork. He took a mouthful and muttered his appreciation. I stared at my food, wondering what the hell had gone through my mind. Was I that seriously gone that I would have a sex dream of my own boss? Jeez, it hadn't been that long since I had sex. Okay, that was a lie. It had been a long time. How long have you lived here? Lincoln asked. I cleared my throat. About 6 months. He noticed I wasn't eating. He put his fork down. Ka Bao, if this is making you uncomfortable, I can leave. I looked up. No, it's not you. It's strange having a man in my place. You know, a man who is not my husband. Lincoln wiped his mouth with a napkin. I'm sure it's going to take some time to move on. It is. It's not easy, and I'm trying to move forward. We've finally finalized everything, so the divorce is practically done. I can now move forward and begin my life again. I mean, for so long, my life had been tied to his. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this. No, he said. Please don't think that. Anyways, excuse my poor manner. I'm not used to entertaining guests. I seldom get visitors. He laughed. If this is poor manners, I must have missed the class. I smiled, finally letting the glass wall down. Thank you.
I did a lot of bad things, and never did I give in, just 'cause the thought of being...
When Lincoln left, the apartment suddenly seemed too big. When he was here, his figure seemed to fit into everything, making it too small. But now that he was gone, all I was seeing was empty spaces. I looked at the fork he had eaten with earlier, and inside, I still felt the heat from the dream I had. God, when did I become a daydreamer like that? It had never happened to me before, and the feeling it left me with was new, exotic, and I wanted more. I could almost feel his lips on mine, his breath on my skin, and my body burning for him. What would it be like to actually kiss Lincoln? Would it be as good as I had imagined, or would it be better? I closed my eyes, sighing deeply at the thought of seeing his face come Monday morning. My office was finished over the weekend, and it was perfect timing. I didn't have to look at Lincoln, and I hated the thought of the dream repeating itself. The office I was given to was large with windows and an oak table with a computer. There was a glass table in the middle with a white rug, a few chairs, and a minibar. There were shelves that I could decorate with my own items, and the walls could use some pictures. I made a mental note to pick up a painting or two to hang. I sat down and turned the computer on. It hummed to life, and a schedule popped up on my screen. I had a lunch meeting with Lincoln, Maverick, and a client named William Henry. Later that evening, there was a charity event at the convention center for a cancer research foundation that Spencer & Spencer had helped build their ads for. There was a knock on the door, and I looked up as Lincoln entered wearing a black suit and gray tie. His eyes were intense and dark, almost reeling me into him. He smiled as he walked in and put his hands in pockets. "Do you like your office?" he asked. "I do, very much." I asked the decorators to leave everything plain. You could decorate it as you see fit. "Thank you." "Listen, I'm sure you've seen the schedule, and I'd like you to join me for tonight's charity event. It's a black tie event, which I'm sure you've already seen it if you did look it over. My limo will pick you up at 7:30. "Okay." When lunch came, I went with the two brothers in the SUV and met with Willem. He was a tall, slender man with brown hair and blue eyes. He wore a gray suit and had a gentle voice. He was also very smart and dedicated to getting his feet into the business world. He wanted to amaze the world with his technology of medical devices that would help change the way MRIs were done. When we wrapped up lunch, however, he asked me to stay behind and would drive me back before the hour was up. I noticed that Lincoln's eyes turned dark at the request, but Maverick only grinned. The two brothers left, and I sat in the same seat as Willem smiled at me. "Alone at last," he said. I laughed. "Is there something I missed?" He leaned forward. "Look, I'm not someone to beat around the bush. I come straight out and say what needs to be said. So here goes. I find you very attractive. How about dinner tonight?" "I can't. I've got a charity event to attend." "Fine. How about after the party ends, I'll call you, pick you up, and we'll go from there." I fidgeted in my seat. Isn't there some fine line that says you and I can't date?" "Not in my book." "Well, in my book there is. I don't associate with clients outside of work. It would be bad for the business if all should fall sour. I hope you don't mind." I stood up to go when he grabbed my wrist. I jerked free and took a step back. "Don't bother sending me. I can walk." As soon as I made it outside, I took a deep breath and shook off the feeling of sickness forming in the pit of my belly. When I rounded the corner, I found Lincoln waiting for me. He was staring at me with those dark eyes of his. The SUV was nowhere in sight, and neither was Maverick. "You didn't have to wait," I said. "I needed to," he replied. "Let's go." "Did he hurt you?" "No." He took a deep breath. "Ka Bao, I know Willem pretty well. His resume and background may be flawless and decorated, but his taste for women and sexual pleasures can be quite dark. He has another side to him that is pretty scary." Trying to hide the fear that kept rising in my throat, I looked away and began digging into my purse to distract myself. When I looked up, Lincoln was staring at me. I took a deep breath and cleared my throat. "I'm fine. We should head back." All through the day, I couldn't stop thinking about Willem's dark stare. It burned into my soul and created me a deep fear that I had never known before. The thought of being stalked scared me, and I found myself looking over my shoulder as I walked everywhere. I couldn't put what Lincoln said out of my mind. It seemed to course its way into my veins and settled in making my skin crawl. When the time rolled for me to leave, I couldn't move fast enough. Grabbing my purse, I took the elevator down, and when I reached the bottom floor and walked to the double glass doors to go out, I realized it was now pouring. I didn't have an umbrella, so I decided to make a run for it. I took my heels off and headed out, breaking into a run once I got outside. The rain was coming down fast, and I was beginning to soak it all in. I unlocked the door and got in, taking a deep breath. I started the car and headed home.
I did a lot of bad things, and never did I give in. Just 'cause the thought.
Looking through the closet, I wasn't sure what I was going to wear to tonight's charity event. All I had were the basics, nothing formal enough. I took a deep breath and realized I should have done some shopping before I came home. The bell ringing at my door surprised me. I walked over and saw my doorman standing in the peephole. I opened it and he had a large package in his hands. "This arrived for you," he said. "Thank you." I brought the package to my room, wondering what was in it. The handwriting on it told me it was sent from Lincoln. I opened it, and my heart almost stopped beating. Inside was a silk gold dress, complete with a stunning diamond collar necklace and a pair of white sparkling heels. My mouth dropped open, and I almost laughed. No one had ever given such an extravagant gift before. I reached out and touched the fabric. It was so soft, so beautiful, and so expensive. I took it out and looked at the size. It was mine, all right. How did he know? I turned to the mirror and smiled. The limo arrived at exactly the time Lincoln said it would. I was waiting in the lobby and walked out. The rain had stopped, thankfully, as I stepped out and the door to the limo opened. Lincoln came out wearing a three-piece tuxedo suit with a black bow tie. He looked good enough to eat. I almost tripped on my feet as his eyes gazed over me. He smiled and reached out a hand to me. The dress fit perfectly. It was a one-piece shoulder that hugged my curves and made my waist longer than it appeared. I had my hair coiled on top of my head and kept my makeup light. "You look beautiful," he said as he kissed my knuckles. "Thanks to you. The pleasure is all mine. Come on, let's go." I settled into the limo and he sat across from me. He opened up a bottle of wine and poured me a glass. I took it and drank slowly, knowing my stomach was empty. I didn't want to be dizzy when I arrived. "Who will be at this charity?" I asked. He turned his gaze to me. "Mostly people with big money who wants to keep their names in the public news. Don't worry, you'll be fine. We're not going to be doing any business. Tonight is just mingling and keeping things light." "Will Maverick be there?" "Yes, you'll get to meet his wife." I nodded. I'd wanted to meet her. I wanted to see what she looked like. The limo came to a stop shortly, and we both got out. Lincoln helped me out by taking my hand. Photographers were already snapping pictures as we walked to the entrance. As we neared, Lincoln took out an invite and handed it to the host. He smiled and took it as we made our way in. I was thankful for the dress Lincoln bought me because everyone was dressed in rich, textured clothes, especially the women whose jewelry were dazzling. A band was playing soft music and some people were dancing on the floor. Waiters in black and white were walking around with champagne flutes and simple appetizers. "There you are," Maverick said. I turned around and saw him making his way toward us with one of the most beautiful women I'd ever laid eyes on. Her hair was red and coiled on top of her head with soft curls around her cheeks. Her eyes were a deep emerald green, and she wore a black dress that had a slit up to her thigh, revealing a very slender leg. A large diamond ring sparkled on her left hand, and Maverick kept his hand on her back as they made their way to her. "Ka Bao, meet my wife, Cassandra." I turned to her and she smiled at me, extending her hand. "It's lovely to meet you." She returned the smile. "I've heard so much about you." I blushed. "It's not all true." She laughed and took my hand. "Come, let's mingle and let the boys be boys." I walked away with her as the two brothers stepped away. I noticed a very leggy blonde staring at me from across the room. She was wearing a dark green strapless dress with a string of pearls across her slender neck. Her hair was down and straight, but the look she gave me was a very heated stare. I tapped Cassandra on the arm. "Who is that woman?" She turned to where I was looking and then scoffed. "Oh, her? I didn't think that she'd be here tonight. That's Naomi. She's an ex of Lincoln's. She probably thinks you're his new item, which explains the ugly stare she's giving you. Ignore her. I do." Cassandra handed me a glass of champagne and we settled down at our table. I noticed that Lincoln was to sit beside me and someone named Dr. Mark Law was to my right. Lincoln and Maverick made their way to the table and sat down. Before long, Dr. Mark Law appeared and took a seat beside me. He was younger than I thought, and we picked up a conversation immediately. His specialty was adult medicine, and he had been practicing for almost 4 years. He was a very tall, well-built man with dark hair and light eyes. He wore a tuxedo just like the rest of the men. I have to say, you're the highlight of my evening, he said as he finished a joke he was telling. Why, thank you. I always leave early at these functions because they're so boring. I give my donation, I chat, and then I find myself snoring at the wrong times. I laughed. You're so funny. He beamed. I'm known for that. A song began playing and he stood up, extending his hand to me. I smiled and took it as he led me to the dance floor. He was an expert dancer and flawless in his moves. I was laughing as he spun me around. Lincoln tapped him on the shoulder. Mind if I cut in? He asked. Mark's face paled, but he gently stepped aside. Go ahead. I'll save you the last dance, I said to him as he smiled and returned to his seat. Lincoln took my hand and we began to move across the floor. He was an even better dancer than Mark, but I sensed something was on his mind. Are you all right? I asked. His eyes focused on me. Why did you dance with him? The question came as such a shock that I almost fell over. What? You heard me. Well, he asked me to, and besides, I didn't know I couldn't dance with anyone. I thought you and I were business partners. He was holding you too close, and you were laughing too loud. That's saying something. I frowned. What's the meaning of this? He bent down so that only I could hear what he had to say. Ka Bao, so help me God, I would tear this gown off of you and make love to you right here if you don't stop arguing with me. My eyes flew open wide as his eyes once again returned to mine. I took a deep breath as his hands tightened on me. I felt his thighs press against me, and as he pulled me even closer, I felt his erection against my belly. When I tried to pull away, he tightened his hold. What are you doing? I asked. Right now, I'm doing everything I can not to take you right here. Since I saw you in that dress, everything in me has gone haywire. Thank you so much. I hope that you are enjoying this story. This story will be continuing. I'll catch you in the next episode.
I did a lot of bad things, and never did I give